In late 2021, right after I decided to move to Austin, Texas, I started searching for an apartment near the downtown area that fit my budget. Pretty quickly, I realized I only had two options. Choose a building that looked like it might collapse at any moment but came with a reasonable price tag, or choose a building that appeared sleek and luxury but came with a not so reasonable price tag. Seeing as I'm a YouTuber and all that matters in my job is making my life look much better than it actually is, I leaned toward the so-called luxury apartment and ended up signing an 18-month lease. Happily ever after, right? I was living in one of the fastest growing cities in America with a growing YouTube channel in a luxury apartment. But I soon came to realize the apartment building I was living in was actually a security nightmare infested with junk and hidden fees. Now, before I pretend I don't recognize I have the extreme privilege to even choose one of these apartments, let's shift our attention to the real issue here. The epidemic of overpriced fake luxury apartments spreading through every major US city right now. In 2024, the number of newly built apartments hit a 50-year high. But here's the catch. 89% of the units completed between 2020 and 2022 were classified as high-end luxury. And there's no data to suggest that this percentage has changed significantly since then. Let's go back to the city I live in, Austin, Texas, as an example. The cheapest one-bedroom studio in one of these luxury buildings will run you around $1,700 a month. Using the common rule that rent should be no more than a third of your income in order to qualify, that means you'd need to make at least $61,000 a year to afford even a small studio. $61,000 is almost exactly the median household income in Austin, so roughly half the people in this city can't even afford a basic studio apartment. That's not just frustrating, it's absurd, and it all ties back to how these apartments are marketed and how these developers can keep inflating prices without having to worry about vacancies. How did we end up here? And more importantly, how do we fix it? Let's explore the luxury apartment crisis in this video. But first, let's talk about health insurance. This is another part of the United States that is filled with overpriced treatments that can only be mitigated with a great insurance plan. The problem is you can scan Google for hours and never find a doctor that actually takes your insurance. So to help with that, I have today's sponsor, Zocdoc. Zocdoc is a free website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. We're talking about in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers across nearly every specialty, from mental health to dental health, eye care to skincare, and much more. I personally need to find a new eye care doctor soon since I moved into this apartment a few months ago and out of that old apartment that I've been talking about. So all I got to do is go into the Zocdoc app and I can filter for doctors who take my insurance, who are located nearby, who specialize in eye exams, and who are highly rated by verified patients. I can also see their actual appointment openings, choose a time that works for me, and again, instantly book a visit. Zocdoc appointments happen fast, usually between 24 to 72 hours of booking, and you can even score same-day appointments. You don't have to talk to anybody, you just click to book a visit. So stop putting off those doctor appointments because you can't be bothered to search through Google for someone who actually takes your insurance, and go to the link in my description, which is zocdoc.com/Cole, to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. This story begins like many other stories that are related to some sort of housing crisis in America, the 2008 financial crisis. Many millennials, after seeing their assets get sucked up at the age most people would buy a house, opted out of having children and into renting apartments. As an ever-growing amount of millennials became DINKs, an acronym short for dual income no kids, they were willing to pay a premium for an apartment that, from the outside looking in, appeared to offer even more than a nice-looking house. Quartz countertops, fancy lighting fixtures, a pool, courtyard, and gym? All while actually being in the city, allowing you to avoid any long commute? What's not to love? Well, it wasn't exactly the equitable relationship between builders and renters that it seemed to be. You see, the main reason builders create more luxury housing than affordable housing is because, at the current moment, it's basically the only housing that is profitable. And this is due to a few reasons. Firstly, urban land pricing has exploded. The Urban Land Institute's 2024 Real Estate Economic Forecast noted that despite a strong economy, the real estate industry faces challenges due to high interest rates and land costs, particularly in urban centers. Urban areas often also have restricted land availability due to zoning laws in existing developments, driving up the value of the limited land that is available for new construction. In Austin, Texas, for example, zoning regulations include standards such as height restrictions, setbacks, and floor to area ratios. These regulations can limit the development potential of properties, thereby reducing the supply of available land for housing. Secondly, the price for construction materials has also skyrocketed. Steel, lumber, concrete, and drywall prices have all increased significantly in the past decade, and it's unlikely that the tariffs recently imposed will help these prices fall. Speaking of things related to the current administration, there's also been a labor shortage of construction workers, especially after years of restricting immigration, since many construction workers in the US are immigrants. And fewer workers equals higher wages in order to attract talent. The last thing I want to go over is that financing and interest rates have also risen sharply. Starting in March 2022, the Federal Reserve initiated a series of interest rate increases, raising the federal funds rate from near zero levels to a range of 5.25% to 5.5% by July 2023. These rate hikes have significantly affected construction financing. The average effective interest rate for speculative single-family construction loans increased from 11.3% in Q4 2022 to 12.59% in Q1 2023. So just about every part of the building process has gotten significantly more expensive in the past decade or so. This being the case, how could you possibly profit off of a building with all of these expenses? Simple. A trick of the trade as old as time. Deceptive marketing. Those quartz countertops I mentioned earlier, a lot of them are made with faux materials. The fancy lighting fixtures, they're cheap mass-produced versions made with thin metal, low-quality wiring, and fragile plastic diffusers that yellow or crack over time. The pool, surrounded by crusty, cheap lawn chairs that constantly have bird crap on them. And the gym usually has a few treadmills, two of which are almost always out of order, some dumbbells, and a Smith machine. The Smith machine, man, it plagues every luxury apartment. You know what? If they actually put a squat rack into luxury apartments, maybe I would consider it actually luxury. Things very cheap to include in a build became the selling points of an apartment that, when observed more thoroughly, is almost exactly the same as an affordable housing apartment. But these little presentation quirks and amenities allow them to price the apartments at a massive upcharge. I know what you might be thinking. Oh, boo-hoo, you only have one treadmill working instead of two. Most people have none of that. But if you're going to make the majority of apartments being built luxury apartments, you're going to label them as that, you're going to market them as that, and you're going to price them as that. These are things you need to improve and maintain. And sometimes the risks of living in these apartments are much worse than you think. At my old luxury apartment, the one I told you about at the start of this video, I had multiple packages stolen because the security system was horrendous. You could easily get into a broken door and just scoop up someone's package laying in the hallways at any time because there weren't any cameras. The mailroom also had no locks and was repeatedly broken into. The parking garage gate was constantly broken, which caused many people's cars to get broken into, and there were even reports of rats around the premises and in apartments. I understand these are things that are kind of unavoidable if you're living in a big city, but again, if you're going to market this as a place of luxury living, then making sure your costs stay low by leaving people more susceptible to pests and robbery is absolutely wild. Oh, and let's not forget the paper-thin walls. That's basically the signature move in these kinds of buildings. Knowing this, you might assume that in the long run, it wouldn't make sense for developers to cut costs and skimp on amenities, because eventually people would move out and vacancies would pile up, right? Wrong, and here's why. Firstly, the current apartment sector operates in what's called a build-to-sell model. Entire apartment buildings are bundled and sold to financial institutions, which often place them into residential real estate investment trusts, or REITs for short. These REITs are then sold to investors who want exposure to a diverse portfolio of real estate without the hassle of directly managing any properties. Once the builders and lenders sell the building, they've already made their profits. Whether the property thrives or struggles with vacancies later on is no longer their concern. That responsibility falls to whoever owns or manages the property down the line. not the original developer. Secondly, there's the construction style. Once you understand the short-term mindset these developers are employing, the next part starts to make even more sense. After the 2008 housing crash, developers increasingly turned to what are called 5/1 developments. It's a type of building where 5 stories of wood frame apartments sit above one level of concrete or steel, usually used for parking or retail. Now, developers love this design because wood's way cheaper than concrete or steel. They can cram in more units and still meet zoning and fire codes. They can rent out the retail space on the first floor for extra profit. It's fast to build, and most importantly, it's cheap enough that even if 20 or 30% of the units sit empty, they can still make a profit. So when you walk into one of these luxury apartments with the marble countertops and the rooftop pool that's mostly used for Instagram photos, but the walls are paper thin and stuff breaks constantly, that's why. It's not built to last, it's built to maximize profits while it's hot, then gets sold off before things fall apart. And the city where I live, Austin, Texas, that I keep talking about, is the perfect example of this. Since the early 2010s, 5/1 developments have become the dominant type of new apartment construction across the city, especially in areas like East Austin, South Congress, and the Domain. Developers favored this model because it allowed them to quickly add hundreds of new luxury units with modern finishes while keeping costs lower than traditional mid-rise or high-rise towers. The result? Austin's skyline and many other fast-growing cities like Seattle, Atlanta, and Nashville are now filled with nearly identical-looking 5/1 apartment complexes, all advertising luxury living even though the actual materials and build quality are often very basic. So with all this cost cutting, why don't they just lower the prices when people start to notice how bad things are? Well, here's where it gets even more frustrating, and it has to do with something called the cap rate. Basically, the value of an apartment building isn't just based on how much it costs to build, it's based on how much income it produces each year. Say a building brings in $500,000 a year in rent and has a cap rate of 5%. That means the building would be valued at $10 million. But if the owner can bump up the rents just a little, or at least make it look like they're charging higher rents, they can make that yearly income number go up. Even an extra $100,000 a year in rent means the building could now sell for $2 million more. And higher rents equals higher building value, even if the quality stays the same or gets worse. That's also why you see apartments charging like $2,000 a month, but offering 2 or 3 months free when you sign the lease. The people valuing the building don't count those special deals. On paper, it looks like everyone's paying full price. And the investors buying these buildings, they know this little trick, they just don't care because most tenants are reluctant to move anyway. Moving is expensive, stressful, and in most cities, you're just trading one overpriced apartment for another one that's basically the same. So with all that being said, the question then becomes, how do we fix this? Because let's be honest, just telling developers to build better, more affordable apartments isn't going to work when the entire system rewards them for doing the opposite. First, I think we need to start with rezoning for medium density housing, which is this missing middle. Most US cities reserve the majority of their residential land for single family homes. That locks out medium density housing options like duplexes, triplexes, and townhomes, which could add supply without the expense or controversy of luxury apartment towers. Medium density housing seems to be the most realistic supply side solution. But even modest zoning reforms face resistance from homeowners, and while more supply can help, it doesn't automatically make those new units more affordable, especially without careful planning. Second thing that could help is to stop subsidizing luxury development through loopholes. Right now, tax breaks, zoning variances, and incentives often go to developers building high-end units. Cities should stop doing that unless truly affordable units are included. But unfortunately, what we have to deal with is that developers can and do threaten to walk away if the profit margins are too small, which could limit housing development. Now, if you're someone who's trying to rent right now, what should you do besides moving to the middle of nowhere where there's no opportunities or living somewhere that's run down and unsafe? Well, while a lot of luxury apartments don't actually offer that much more safety, and you could technically find one that is worth the value, like I have with this current apartment, I gotta repeat some of the more obvious answers because they are worth repeating. Look for older, well-maintained apartments or medium-density housing where it exists. These units tend to offer better value than flashy new builds. Another thing you can do is negotiate at lease renewals. This is something I did at my old apartment complex and I plan on doing here. These apartment complexes have vacancies. In a lot of cases, They need you more than you need them, so you can negotiate the price per month when you sign up for your lease or when you renew your lease too. And lastly, you should pay attention to local housing debates and zoning changes and vote for people who favor affordable housing. Also, if some of y'all after watching this take up urban planning as a job or major in it in college, that would be dope too. Unfortunately, no single fix is going to solve this. Just build more apartments won't cut it, unless what gets built actually serves middle and lower income renters. And that won't happen until cities stop rewarding developers for building overpriced short-term profit machines disguised as homes. If you found any creative ways to survive this rental market, or you've also got your own ridiculous stories of how bad it's gotten where you live, I would love to hear them in the comments below. And if you like this video, you might like my debt crisis video, why so many Americans are in debt. Check that out right here, and I am leaving. Goodbye.